Well, this is a session that I've really been wanting to anchor. It's not the first time that Aadit and I have had a conversation. Aadit and I had a conversation virtually in the height of COVID when some of the work that Zepto did was absolutely incredible in terms of deliveries to homes, people being unable to get out. What his brand of was able to achieve and the industry that he's a part of, how that's prospering is something that we really want to look at this evening. But from the vibrant streets of Mumbai emerges as, we can share a tale of youthful ambition and swift success. Aadit is just 22 and, he's somebody who's turned the quick commerce sector on its head with Zepto. The startup is now valued at over $5 billion. He dropped out of Stanford to chase a vision. Aadit was then just 17 years old alongside Kaivalya Vora. They crafted a platform delivering essentials in minutes, redefining convenience. Their journey from Zepto's inception to 2021 to becoming India's youngest unicorn founders is not just a business story, it's a beacon for dreamers everywhere, proving that with innovation and daring, the future can be delivered today. Thanks so much for being with us. Question number one. When you told your parents at the age of about 18 that you were dropping out of Stanford, did they show you the door?
No, first.
Yeah, it's on.
Firstly, it's wonderful to be here. Thanks for that generous introduction. So, no pressure for the rest of the session. But to answer your question, I think, although it's, on the outside and it looks like a very, sort of cliche Silicon Valley story. We dropped out of college to start a company. Actually, before we took that step, Kaivalya and I, we were basically tinkering around for about a year. And, as kids, we loved coding, right? We used to build out small projects for fun growing up. But, in the middle of COVID, we didn't really have much to do. We were supposed to go to California to study. Obviously, all of us got put back into Bombay in that first wave of the pandemic. And we didn't really see the value in online education. So, we took a call to, instead of wasting a year of that experience, let's just take a year off and just tinker around and build some interesting stuff. Most of our peers at the time at Stanford had internships at Goldman Sachs or Google. We didn't really have any of that lined up. And we just took a call to start experimenting. And
how did you think this up?
We were just, the two of us were sitting in Shehri Punjab and Andheri East. First wave of the pandemic, you couldn't get groceries delivered. The offline options were all usually shut down. The online options at the time were taking 6-7 days to deliver. And so we started with a WhatsApp group. And over the course of a year, we kept tweaking and iterating on the model, kept talking to customers, and started building out the first version of Zepto probably a year after we launched that WhatsApp group, and got to a meaningful scale, which is when we took that call to drop out, right, formally. And I think, with our parents, obviously, it was a shocking moment, right? I remember, Kaivalya's mother burst into tears and said, "What have you done to my son? Right? You've brainwashed him." But, I think we had some real numbers to go back off. We were doing at that time a few $1 million in revenue and growing fast, and we were about to raise a large amount of capital. So we had some substance behind what we were doing, and, there was real customer love. So we could take that that call based on data and not just sort of gut feel. I know the story is a little bit more exciting if it was just like a crazy idea, but at that time we had some numbers and we had some scale, and then we took the call. So at least, our fathers were a little bit more comfortable with it when they saw the numbers. So, yeah.
So when you go to Kaivalya's mother now and say, "Ma'am, my valuation is $5 billion," what does she say? Go back to school?
Yeah, pretty much she just says that, yes. She still says, "What a beautiful life you've given up on at college," but yeah.
I'm just trying to understand, why did you pick 10 minutes as opposed to 15 minutes for delivery or 20 minutes?
So, like I mentioned, we took a year just talking to customers. And, at Zepto, we're a customer company, right? That's the way that we call ourselves. And when we were speaking to customers at the time, most grocery in India is bought hyperlocally, right? Most of the people told us that, for them to really order multiple times a week, it had to be, seamless, as easy as going downstairs and picking up, fruits and vegetables or picking up day-to-day packaged foods. And we took it as more of an ambition. Can we sustainably, structurally at scale, do 10-minute delivery. We launched the first micro warehouse or dark store in Bandra in Mumbai, and that's when we experimented with it. And we realized, after a few months of iteration, that hey, this is actually possible and scalable. And that's when we took upon ourselves to go to the extreme lengths. Like we didn't think there was anything more extreme than 10 minutes, and we said that let's push ourselves to actually deliver this for the customer. And like the last panelist said, right, like if you do something good, profits will follow, and that's what we've seen, right? Like because the retention and customer love is so high, and largely because of that 10-minute delivery promise, we've been able to see some pretty incredible economics and scale in this model very quickly, which is why people are excited about quick commerce generally.
But in India, when it rains, it pours. Gurgaon gets flooded in 5 minutes, Delhi in about 10, and yet you promise 10-minute deliveries.
There's obviously some nuance to it, right? Like obviously if it's raining heavily, then we don't deliver nearly as fast. And when you open up the app, you see a live ETA. So you might see 6 minutes, you might see 11 minutes, you might see 14 minutes. In a flood, you might see 24 minutes, 25 minutes when it's in a heavy rain situation, or maybe we can't service it at all if it's heavily flooded. So obviously it fluctuates, but the median today is about 10.6, 10.7, like what we're live tracking towards. So yeah.
We don't talk very much about gig workers, do we? And we should. These are the people who, in a sense, are, literally drive the company. I mean, it's a cliche, but they actually are the transporters. It's difficult. It's hot in India. It's cold in India. The conditions are difficult. The traffic is crazy. So how important are the people, the men and the women who are gig workers, who are part of your business?
No, absolutely. I mean, our philosophy is to add value to all our stakeholders, right? Customers, the workers that we have across the business, and obviously then shareholders in that order, right? And, we look at adding value to a delivery partner's life as a core part of the value proposition of Zepto. And interestingly enough, the more value you add to those delivery partners, the more retention that you have in that fleet, the lower your costs become, and the better your overall business outcome becomes as well. So we don't just look at, goodwill to delivery partners as a, social initiative. We look at it as actually a business objective, right? And, as a result of that, if you look at the way that we've, built out this delivery fleet, we've basically gone from 0 to 50,000 delivery partners that earn a livelihood on Zepto in 36 months, right? Effectively 50,000, people now have sort of, steady, stable, consistent income very quickly, and that's rapidly expanding. And how have we added, value to their lives? From our perspective, we do things that we are proud of, like for example, giving them, the ability to do doctor consultations, vehicle repair and insurance on their vehicles, even things like term insurance, right? We go a little bit above and beyond. We're constantly trying to innovate as a team. Like we've got a dedicated engineering and product team that's just constantly trying to figure out how we can add more value. So for example, when I speak to delivery partners and when our team speaks to delivery partners, one of the things they talk about is, cash flow, access to capital that's cheap. So we said, okay, instead of paying them every week, can we pay them every day? Mm-hmm. Can we pay them every hour, right? So we're going to like to even crazy lengths to solve some of their problems. And if we can't do that, then we partner with, let's say, an NBFC to give them lower cost of capital, and we negotiate on their behalf, right? And so, from our lens, we are always on the lookout to add more value to them. Obviously, there is a marketplace, right? There is, structural forces of demand and supply in the labor market. But we do try, our philosophy at Zepto is how do we unlock more productivity so that we can pay them more or pay them in a stable fashion instead of this race to the bottom where we constantly keep chipping away at their income. We don't think it's productive. We don't think it's sustainable. We think real efficiency unlock, and then sharing that efficiency is a real way to compound. So in a nutshell, everything from the basics from health insurance to vehicle insurance and other benefits, all the way to cash flow visibility, innovations on how we pay them and solve for day-to-day problems, all the way to new things that we're trying to figure out, like giving them pure play flexibility to work, even if they want to do, let's say, if you're an MBA student and you've got 2 hours in the afternoon, can we create a gig worker style program for you to give that MBA, an income of 8,000 rupees a month, if not a full, 25,000 rupees a month, which still makes a huge difference. We keep trying to do these innovations to add value, and genuinely we're good faith. And the last thing that I'll mention, sorry, is that, even with stakeholders in the government, right, we are always, open to feedback and suggestions. So, we work with state governments, and if they genuinely feel like there's a better way that we can add value, we're obviously open to it with, like I mentioned, the real constraint of, demand and supply and labor that we have to all adhere to, right? But yeah.
No, so when you look at AI and the way the technology is improving, where do you see, for example, for me as a user, the interface change, let us say 5 years down the road? How would it be easier for me, and how would it possibly be premised on 6G coming into India?
That's a great question. So, for us, what's a little bit interesting about our company, and you'll see this with most of the startups, is that we have that Silicon Valley product and tech DNA. So we have like a high-performing, engineering and product team that we've built out pretty methodically in Bangalore to be able to genuinely build like real systems that can add value on data science and artificial intelligence. So, for example, we have an advertising business for, let's say, the Unilevers and Procter and Gambles of the world to bid on search keywords at Zepto and to get like ad placements live on the platform. And we're making hundreds of crores of revenue of that. That's pure bottom line because it's just advertising. And that engine that we built in-house, that we call Jarvis internally, all the ranking engine, the bidding and attribution on that ad stack, all of it is powered by data science and machine learning models. And we built all of that in-house, and it's taken us some time to do it, but we built it relatively quickly. Or, for example, to your question, as a user, what's different for the user today that we can actually do with data science and machine learning systems? So search is one of the biggest things that we focus on. So how can I just look at your search history and personalize results for you so that you are getting relevant products, right? If you sit in Defense Colony versus if you sit in West Delhi, there's a difference in what you want to see, right? If you've got an iPhone versus you have an Oppo phone, there's a difference in what you want to see, et cetera, right? If you've looked at feminine hygiene products, and that means you're probably a female customer, can we push more products that are more relevant to you? So constantly building that relevance to make the user's buying experience better. And then the last thing that I'll mention is, there are interesting things that we're even doing on our selection. So how can we predict store by store, micro market by micro market, what a customer would want, looking at the tens of millions of data points that we have historically, and that's actually helping us improve our selection. That's helping us get sourcing leverage to improve our prices. So everything from the search and recommendations to the advertising business to the supply chain. There's a lot of machine learning that we already use today. And then down the road, as we speak, for example, we're working on a generative AI solution on customer support, right? So instead of waiting for 30 to 45 seconds for a human being to respond to you, why don't you wait 2 seconds and then a generative AI chatbot will respond to you and do a better job, candidly, than even a human could do in that format. So we're working on it, and we think it'll add real value to customers.
What's the average age of Zepto?
The age of a Zepto customer?
Yeah, of your workforce.
For workforce, corporate workforce would be around 29 or so.
So you're still younger than your average workforce.
Very much. I'm younger than the interns. I keep getting that. I keep getting that feedback. But yeah.
So how do people in the workplace sort of deal with you? They see you as this 22-year-old boss, who's 22 is like old for you. You started when you were much younger. How does that dynamic work?
Well, I think the culture that we're building at Zepto is fairly substance-based, right? We're pretty methodical, rigorous supply chain style culture on one hand, and then on the other hand, you've got this like technology and engineering culture that's very aggressive and innovative. But it's all rooted in one key thing, which is execution excellence, right? And that's the one thing that we've believed in since day one. And I think it's taken some time, but with the team that we have, and candidly, like you mentioned, most of the people the people that report to me are mostly almost double my age, right? And I'd say are some of the best executives in internet in India today, right? For example, the CFO of Myntra, who's now our CFO, or top tier, tech leaders from the Flipkarts and the Amazons of the world, right, that have joined Zepto. They report to me, and I think it's taken time, but hopefully Keval and I have been able to prove our ability to add value and go deep into the details and actually run tracks rigorously ourselves and execute. And I think there's a mutual respect of that, execution and strategic thinking that comes from the top management team and us. And that's basically what's ended up happening. So, it's substance-based. Hopefully we've shown some substance so far, not all the way there yet, but I think, the team has a little bit of conviction that maybe Aadit has some idea of what he's doing. And so they give me that leeway.
No, I'm sure they do. Expansion, obviously, key on the cards.
Right.
And that comes with a whole set of challenges because Every market is different. And markets for you are tiny. I mean, you don't necessarily look at a state as one monolithic form.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you actually decide to expand?
Absolutely. So I'll give you a little bit of history, right? We've had a pretty interesting journey at Zepto. We've gone from zero to about 10,000 crores in volume in 2.5 years. So fastest growing internet company of all time in Indian history, and we're very proud of that. And even on that base of over $1 billion in top line, we're growing pretty rapidly even as we speak, expanding into new markets. So for example, in the past 90 days alone, we've launched cities like Nasik, like Chandigarh, like Jaipur, like Lucknow, like Coimbatore. So, we are actually launching new cities as we speak. And, the framework is straightforward, right? We start city by city, what's the descending order of priority? We're looking at e-commerce data, we're looking at food delivery data, we're looking at, all the data that's available out there on population density, et cetera, whatever we can get our hands on that's publicly available. And we've ranked cities, and we've done this exercise a while ago. And then in descending order of priority within the cities, then there's a fairly rigorous process on micro market by micro market, what do we launch? And so we've got a network design team that's just dedicated to that. And we're looking at, again, we have an algorithm that looks at a few data points that we can plug into our model, right? Like, for example, let's say how many restaurants do we see in this micro market as an indicator of consumption, or how many high rises exist here? What's the average flat per society complex that we see, et cetera, and then obviously some subjective data, and then we rank all the micro markets within the city, and then we try to prioritize them. But at this point, we're expanding pretty meaningfully, so wherever we can get our hands on a property, we move fast there. But it's a fairly methodical, boring process that we've built out over time, and so for the past 18 months or so, we've obviously been slow on expansion from a geographic perspective. Obviously, within our existing markets, we've grown pretty rapidly, largely because capital was difficult to come by. 2022, 2023, we were constrained on the ability to invest in capex and launch new stores. But obviously now we've proven the economics to a great extent. We've been able to raise capital, and now we're expanding pretty aggressively geographically.
Absolutely incredible story. But before you leave, one last question. How at the age of 22 now, do you deal with the fact that you're a phenomenally wealthy human being? You run a company with a market valuation of $5 billion, and that, I believe, is set to go up. Does that affect you, your lifestyle, or do you just keep working and pegging away with ideas?
Look, not much, candidly, right? I mean, we started this company without the intent of starting a company. Both Keval and I just were really excited about building interesting things. And, we love what we're building. Like, we work like crazy. The people from my team here that know, the way that we work. But we just are genuinely so excited about what we're building. And I'll tell you what actually motivates us, right? It's not really about, money or personal wealth, because candidly, working like 80, 100 hours a week, we could have probably worked half of that with a lot less stress and still been doing fairly well, right? At a certain point, money becomes inconsequential. But what's exciting to us, and I think what's the theme of this entire summit, is that, if you look at large internet outcomes globally, in the US or in China or in, parts of Southeast Asia or in Latin America, people have really built companies that have gone in the span of a decade or a decade and a half, have gone from zero to 70, 80, 90 billion. I mentioned that last time we spoke as well, right? Very large outcomes where companies generate hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars of cash flow, like world-class companies in internet like Uber or Airbnb or Coupang or Mercado Libre in Latin America, or obviously the Chinese companies, Meituan, Pinduoduo. And candidly speaking, and we have to be open and honest about this as a startup ecosystem, we've not really built a world-class internet company of that scale in India to date, right? We don't really have a company that does $1 billion of free cash flow and has compounding cash flows at scale and has created tens of billions of dollars of value, with one or two exceptions, right? But really large outcomes, still yet to be seen. And we think we have a shot at really building out an exciting company. And if we do it, there's a huge amount of value that we'll add, not just to shareholders, capital markets, but to the startup ecosystem at large. Like if Zepto and companies like, for example, Zomato, build very large outcomes, $60, $70 billion outcomes, and are generating thousands of crores of cash and compounding, then the entire startup ecosystem, we think, will 5x, 10x from here. I mean, if you look at candidly speaking, a city like Shanghai today
Yeah.
has a larger startup ecosystem by market cap than the entirety of this country, right? And we don't want that to continue. We want to 10x from here, right? We don't want to grow 20% a year from here, right? And that's the excitement and promise of India. And so we think if we set the flag for that, it can be like a Flipkart moment all over again. So that's basically what really keeps us excited and working the way that we're working. So that's
So
that's
you
that.
were 19 when Zepto became a unicorn, right?
Something like that, right?
Something like that. Well, I'd like to thank you very much for being with us. Aadit Palicha is the youngest unicorn founder in the country, and that remains the case, not just when he was 19. Zepto has a market valuation of $5 billion, and that's something that's likely to rise. It just goes to show the spirit of the courage and the conviction that he had in his ideas, and to chase a 10-minute model, which most of us would say is impossible. And look at where he is as a young person, deciding to take this by dropping out of college, and that also Stanford. But it is absolutely incredible to have you over here today, and thank you so much, and all the very best for the future.
My pleasure.
Thank
Thank you so much. Very kind of you. Thank you.